Welcome to episode 8 of the Gambots Podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and this is my co-host.
It's Christian.
Today we're going to be doing a fantasy football update of Christian's team. We're going to be talking about The Good Place. Christian saw Venom and Smallfoot this weekend, and I'm going to give you a review of Yooka-Laylee. But first, Christian, how did you do in fantasy football this week?
I got smoked.
Oh yeah, rough week?
Yeah, I lost 153 to 99.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Who really let you down this week?
Well, my kicker got 0, which it was projecting he was going to get 0, but I didn't really have anyone to replace him, and I didn't really feel the desire to go out and hunt for somebody. My tight end only scored me 6. Bortles didn't have a great week, but it looks like he's going to have about as good a week as Breeze is. I benched Breeze, and he's playing as of this recording. He's currently in the second half of his game, but he's only sitting at 10 points right now.
And it sounds like your opponent also had just a pretty good week themselves with scoring 150 points. I'm assuming you guys are in a standard scoring league?
Yeah.
So it's hard to overcome that high of a score.
Yeah, and his kicker got -5, which I'm not really even sure how that happens, but so he had a real good week with the rest of his guys.
Yeah, that's a high-performing week. So what is your record for the season so far?
After tonight, I'll be 3-2.
All right, so episode 2 of The Good Place came out last week. Did you get a chance to watch it?
I did. I loved it.
Yeah, I was a big fan of this one as well. They keep surprising me with every episode.
Yeah, Trevor is in this episode a lot, and he sucks, and he's great at it.
He's so good. The way that he individually annoys each of them, I thought was so good. Like when he asks her, I sent you all of these really good memes. Which one was your favorite? That's so funny because it's just such an annoying thing.
Every single time he opened my mouth, I thought, I hate this person.
Yeah. His interactions with Michael in the bathroom, I thought were great, where Michael could not think of a comeback to the Dick Tracy jokes. Oh my God. It was so good.
And Janet showing up on Earth was fun and not being able to summon anything.
Yeah. I was curious if they're going to have Adam Scott on all season, but spoiler alert-ish, it does not seem like it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah, that surprised me. Yeah, on the topic of spoilers, I really thought this season was going to be just about them hiding their tinkering and their manipulation from the judge, but they did away with that premise pretty quickly, and now they're looking at something else. So I'm excited to see where they go with it. I really like this show for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that it's never really what I expect it to be.
Yeah, I'm really curious, and this was a fan theory that someone had told me about, so it made me think two parts about this. Was in season 1, I guess a lot of the demons were saying something along the lines of, I'm really disappointed, I really practiced my Australian accent. So there's a fan theory out there that they're still in the bad place and that this is just an elaborate ruse. I don't think that's the case. My somewhat thought process is I wonder if this is like a test of Michael because he's changed sides so dramatically. If this is a judge's test for him.
Yeah, that's possible. So the one that said that was Vicky. That was in one of the reboots. She was an Australian and she never got to actually open her mouth before they figured it out and everybody got rebooted again. I could definitely see them digging in and bringing her out and saying, hey, you loved that Australian accent so much, go put it to work.
But overall, really good episode. I highly suggest anyone who does not watch The Good Place to binge watch the first 2 seasons and get caught up. It's such a good show.
Yeah, and Jason is just really fortifying his position as one of my favorite characters in anything ever, especially in this episode where he has that spider.
His lines just start he's so good at. I'm curious if these are his lines or if just meander with your thoughts. Because they're so, if they do write these, they write meandering thoughts perfectly because he's so airheaded.
Well, I've listened to that Good Place podcast where they interview a lot of them, and they said that a lot of his lines are kind of ad-libbed, where he'll do it the way it's written, and then he'll be like, can I do it a couple other ways? I'm just I'm having an idea, and a lot of times they go with the stuff that he comes up with in the moment.
That's good. When he said when he had the spider, he's like, look, I'm already getting powers. My hand's swelling.
Yeah, they wrote well for him because they said that the character was originally meant to be written a little differently, and then he came in and they were like, nope, this is how it's going to be now.
So you got to see the season premiere of Doctor Who. What did you think?
Yeah, so the season started Sunday, and it started strangely. It was interesting. I really like Jodie Whittaker. I loved her in Broadchurch, and I think she's going to do excellently as the Doctor. She was really, really good in this first episode. But it's an episode without the TARDIS, and so I don't want to get too spoilery, but that looks like it might be a driving force for the season. Because at the end of the last episode, right after she regenerates, she falls out of the TARDIS and kind of crashes into a train at the beginning of this one.
Does she get a new companion this season, or is it the same one from the previous season?
No, she gets a team of them, it looks like. There's going to be 3 of them that hang around with her. It's 2 guys and a girl, and they're all really, really strong characters based on this first episode. They're well developed. And I think that's a testament to the new writer, Chris Chibnall, who worked with Jodie on Broadchurch. This had a much more personal feel to it. There was like a family dynamic, and there were relationships that got explored. And it's the kind of writing that I grew to appreciate from his other show.
Interesting. Is this the most companions he's had, at least in the reboot? In the reboot,
I believe so. I'm trying to go back now.
At least from what I remember, he started out, and I'm forgetting the companions' names, but in the first one, he had the blonde girl and her boyfriend who was in it sometimes. And then after that, they had Rory and Amy, what's her name? The redheaded girl who ended up being in, she was in Jumanji, and I know she's been in a lot more stuff. I'm just blanking on her name.
That's Karen Gillan. She's actually Nebula in the Marvel movies.
Okay. After that, I did not really see after them, so I don't know companions after that. But I think Peter Capaldi, or however you say his last name, only had 1.
Yeah, it's probably is the most. A third might have popped in and out here and there, but if this is a dedicated 3, I think this is going to be the largest number. Because, yeah, Peter Capaldi had Clara for most of his time, and then in his last year, just this past season, he had Bill and Nardole, so he had 2 companions. Matt Smith had Amy and Rory, and then Clara. And David Tennant had a couple of singles. He had Martha, and then he had Donna, and he had, like you said, Rose and Mickey. But yeah, I think 3 is probably the top.
Who is your favorite of the companions that you've seen?
Probably Clara, Jenna Louise Coleman. She finished out Matt Smith's last half season, I believe, and then she was with Peter Capaldi for 2 years. I thought she was the best and the most dynamic we had so far.
Yeah, the first season I saw had Amy and Rory, and I think I just might be... It's like, the first time you see it, that becomes your favorite automatically. I think that might be why I like them the best. But I also did like Rose and Mickey, even though Mickey wasn't in it all the time. I think I liked him more than I liked Rose. I thought he was funny.
But yeah, this new season is off to a good start. Like I said, it's a little more relationship driven, at least this episode was. And so I'm excited to see where Chris Chibnall takes it. He's a fantastic writer. And I was really excited when I found out that he was going to be taking over.
Well, good. Hopefully it continues, because I know this season was going to be facing a lot more criticism if it did poorly, because just they have a woman doctor, and I think a lot of people would take the easy argument and say that's why the season was bad. So I'm glad they started out strong. So this weekend, you got to see Venom. Venom is a movie directed by Robin Fleischer, and it stars Tom Hardy. What did you think of it?
It was so much fun. I didn't have a lot of expectations going in, but only really because I didn't know much about Venom. I was telling people everything I learned about Venom, I learned from Spider-Man 3, and everybody just kind of grimaced at me. So it was fun to go in with not a whole lot of knowledge, and oh man, it lived up to the hype. It was very good.
I'm excited because it's getting killed on Rotten Tomatoes. Right now it stands at a 31% by the critics, but the fans have it at an 89%. And Venom is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains and then Marvel characters. I first saw Venom in the old Spider-Man cartoons, but since then he's been in games. I've read runs of Ultimate Spider-Man where they have him, and also I've read some of the Venom runs in his standalone comic where it was Flash Thompson taking on the symbiote, and he was actually a hero, and I thought those were pretty good. So I'm excited to see that you're saying it was a fun movie, which I think that's all you can really ask for with a character like Venom.
Yeah, it was very fun. Now, Tom Hardy plays Eddie Brock, who is the guy that gets possessed by Venom, but he also voices Venom himself. And the two characters have just a great back and forth chemistry. They play off each other, they talk to each other, and that's honestly what makes the movie for me. It was just very fun watching the two characters kind of come to terms with what was happening to each other.
Does the symbiote seem to be taking over Tom Hardy and he is fighting with it, or is this one where they actually pair up?
It's kind of a fight at the beginning, but then they get into like a high-speed chase, and Tom Hardy starts to see the usefulness of it. And then by about halfway through the movie, they're kind of just paired up with each other, and Tom Hardy's or Eddie Brock's more along the lines of just, all right, he's here and he can be useful from time to time.
That's interesting. I'm very curious to see how they do it, because a big thing in the comics is Eddie more or less starts to hate being with the symbiote, and he eventually turns into, I forget it's a white Venom that can cure symbiotes because of his hatred for Venom. Yeah, and then he eventually gets it back again. But I was curious how they handle this. So is this going to be, do you think, in its own universe? Is this an established universe, or do they not really let on?
I think this is the beginning of a new universe. So there's the MCU, which this does not tie into at all. And then around Christmas, we're getting into the Spider-Verse. And I'm not really clear if these two are going to be related, if this is going to be related to Spider-Verse or not. I don't think it is, but I'm not really in the know. But they do tease. There's a mid-credit scene where they do tease a throw to like what's coming next. And I have seen a couple of articles about what like villains are going to be upcoming. And I read a long time ago that since Sony no longer owns the rights to Spider-Man, they're trying to build a Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man.
Interesting. And they might be making Venom that centerpiece because he's Spider-Man-like. Yeah,
that's what it looks like.
Interesting. Is there any reference to Spider-Man at all in this, or is he just completely ignored?
Not at all.
It's so weird because Venom's so closely tied to Spider-Man, which if you saw the third one or anything, Venom's from outer space. It comes down on, it eventually goes with Spider-Man. And that's actually where it gets a lot of its powers from, is because it imitates Spider-Man's powers. And so I'm very curious to see how they handle that in this movie. This is a movie that I'm definitely going to have to check out this week.
Yeah. So there's a lot of characters from Spider-Man in this, but no Spider-Man himself. Like Eddie Brock obviously is the first one in Venom himself, but there's other symbiotes in this, not just Venom. So Riot makes an appearance and a couple of others that aren't named. And then Cletus Cassidy is brought up. So there's a lot of talk around Spider-Man, but he's notably absent.
And I think it's interesting that your first experience with Venom is actually the third Spider-Man, where he was just horribly portrayed.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me, because, I mean, they killed the character in that, and it was so disappointing because, I mean, the third Spider-Man just had so many problems. I mean, Venom was probably the least of theirs, but how they handled him, and that was so bad. So I'm glad he's finally getting what he's supposed to be. My biggest gripe actually with Spider-Man 3 is they made Eddie Brock into like a wuss.
Topher Grace.
And whereas in the comics and stuff, like Eddie Brock could bench press 400 pounds on his own. Like, he's a big guy to begin with. So many poor choices in Spider-Man 3.
Now, in the comics, you might know better than I, what is Eddie Brock's profession? Is he an astronaut like he was in third Spider-Man, or is he a journalist like he was in this, or is he something else?
So unless the comics are slightly different, all my knowledge of this is mixed between the comics and then the cartoon. J. Jonah Jameson's son is supposed to be an astronaut who comes back with the symbiote on it. And then Eddie Brock is a reporter who essentially gets fired because Peter Parker is taking a bunch of pictures of Spider-Man and Eddie Brock can't take a picture of Spider-Man. And then the symbiote attaches to Spider-Man. It makes Spider-Man into sort of a jerk. And Spider-Man humiliates Eddie Brock at one point. Then Spider-Man abandons the symbiote. So Eddie Brock has a vendetta against Spider-Man and Peter Parker because he forced him to lose his job. And then Spider-Man was really mean to him. And then the symbiote hates Spider-Man because it abandoned him. It tried, injured it, getting it off of him. No, sorry. Short answer. He's a photographer like Peter Parker.
In this, he's a investigative journalist. I guess they've updated it because he's like an investigative journalist that it looks like he runs a format similar to like a vlog or a blog, and which was cool to see.
I think you got updated to some extent. I mean, newspapers are slowly becoming obsolete. The biggest update I actually think has been really smart by Spider-Man Universe Adjacent is in the newest Spider-Man game for the PlayStation 4. J. Jonah Jameson is essentially like a Rush Limbaugh or something. He's a conservative TV personality instead of being the head of a newspaper.
Well, speaking of the newspaper and of inconsistencies with like the MCU, so this movie takes place in San Francisco and not in New York City, where all of the Spider-Man stuff always takes place. And they do reference New York very briefly at the beginning when Michelle Williams mentions to Eddie that he has been kind of thrown out of New York City after he lost his job with the Daily Herald. And the newspaper that Spider-Man worked for with Jameson was the Daily Bugle.
Yeah.
So it seems like there is kind of a very precise battle for naming rights going on between Sony and Disney, where they're each scooping up like individual names from the Spider-Man universe.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's kind of funny that they can't use the name Daily Bugle. But being in San Francisco is actually a callback to one of the old Venom runs, Lethal Protector, where once him and Spider-Man more or less came to an uneasy truce, Eddie Brock and Venom decided to leave New York because in their minds, they're not the bad guys, right? And he becomes like a Spider-Man in San Francisco. So I think that's maybe why they chose that city.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like what's going to be happening like as this universe unfolds.
Cool. I'm really excited to see this. I'm glad that the fan reaction is so good on it. And I think if I go into this thinking, this isn't going to be the best movie ever, but it's going to be a fun movie, my expectations are a lot different. And I bet I can be happy with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom Hardy's funnier than people give him credit for. He does a good job in this movie.
And so this movie's actually killed at the box office. I read somewhere it set the records for October releases. It has 80.1 million in its first weekend, it looks like.
Yeah, it's number one, I know for sure.
So it's good. I did not know Venom had so much of an audience. That's cool.
People were excited. Even here, tons of people coming in with like the Venom eyes and the smile on their T-shirt and hats and all sorts of stuff.
All right, so you actually had a pretty busy week, Christian. You also saw Smallfoot. I know nothing about this. What is Smallfoot?
Smallfoot is a weird little animated movie that kind of subverts the Bigfoot myth and makes them the main characters, and that humans are mythological creatures to them that they call Smallfoots.
How is it?
It's really good. So they live on top of this mountain that's constantly shrouded by clouds, and so they can't see the world below, and the people can't see the world above. And a plane crashes on top of it and kind of forces their worlds together. And it's got a great cast. Channing Tatum plays the main character. Danny DeVito is his father. Zendaya and Common. It's a big cast. LeBron James plays one of the characters. And I can't say any of the characters' names. They've all got crazy Himalayan-sounding names. But it's very fun. It's a musical. Common has a fantastic rap about halfway through. Just blew me away. And there's a lot of interesting subtext that they put in about the world at large, like the real world, about the idea of belief over science and the idea that ignorance is bliss, because the leader keeps trying to convince people that Smallfoot isn't real and that there isn't a world outside of the mountain. And it was a very interesting movie. It's not what I expected it to be, and it really surprised me. I liked it a lot.
That's cool. I'm usually a very big fan of animated movies because I think they tend to be better than a lot of people are going to give them credit for, because the people making these don't want to make bad movies, and they usually sneak in, even if it's directed at kids, they try and sneak in lessons and also some jokes they will go over a kid's head that are still funny to adults. So I'm curious. I probably won't see this in theaters, but I might check this out once it's on TV or Netflix or something.
Yeah, it's well worth a watch. I was very happy with it. Kind of back to back, Zendaya sings a song about questioning things that you take for granted and how you really need to dive into the things that people tell you and not just take everything at face value. Kind of like an appeal to be more scientifically minded. And then Common sings that song about upholding the status quo and how people don't know what's best for themselves and you need to help them by kind of shielding them from the truth. It was a really, really good, fun movie that had a lot of really interesting and deep implications.
Cool. I'm looking at this list. I actually see Justin Roiland as a voice, who is co-creator of Rick and Morty and does the voice of Rick and Morty, actually. So it's good to see him doing more work than just Rick and Morty.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have recognized him.
Yeah, I guess he played Gary, if it rings a bell. He scores the bottom, so I'm guessing he was just like a small role.
I'm pretty sure I know who Gary was.
Okay.
Yeah, I spent the entire movie not recognizing Channing Tatum's voice, and then his name popped up in the credits, and I was like, that's who it was.
So in gaming news, last week, there are 3 pretty big releases. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was released for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and Mega Man 11 was released for those 2 consoles as well as the Switch. And the Switch also had the newest Mario Party come out. Initial reviews are overwhelmingly positive for Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I think they're around somewhere in the 80s on Metacritic. Similar for Mega Man 11, it took the jump into 2.5D away from pixels, but they have retained some of the old, it's more like the original games with updates. So it looks pretty cool. And then Mario Party, I know generally it's been well received. It's supposed to have returned the series to its roots and be good, whereas the past couple have been disappointing. So apparently all 3 are supposed to be pretty good. I just haven't had a chance to check any of them out. Do you have any interest in any of those games, Christian?
Yeah, the Assassin's Creed sounds pretty cool. I was talking to one of my coworkers, and he said it's been really, really fun to play through. He got it a couple of days ago. I have had kind of no contact with Assassin's Creed since Assassin's Creed 2, but if I got a console that could play it, I would definitely check it out. I was a big fan of the earlier ones.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that one too. I'm still currently playing Horizon Zero Dawn, which is also an open world game and sort of the same vein. So I need to finish Horizon Zero Dawn first, and I don't know if I'm going to be up for another open world immediately after, but I might wait till it goes on sale. Also, in news that I think will interest you, Kingdom Hearts has announced that they're releasing another title before Kingdom Hearts 3 called Kingdom Hearts The Story So Far for the PlayStation 4, where it has all 9 games that they've previously released on 1.5, 2.5, 2.8. It's just all on one disc for the PlayStation 4 for $40.
Yeah, I saw this.
I mean, it has a ridiculous name, just The Story So Far, but for $40, that's quite a deal to get 9 games.
Yeah, I guess the title's kind of the least of my concerns. I hadn't seen that it was only $40, so that makes it a little better. My biggest complaint about the Kingdom Hearts franchise is how much Disney just seems to want to bleed all of their customers of all their money that they can possibly get. I don't know how many we've had 9 games, you said, and then there's been so many ports. They moved the Chain of Memories over to the PS2, and then they included it in the remaster, and they moved Coded from the mobile phone over to the DS, I believe, and then they just scrapped that game completely and just included the video clips of it in the remaster. And then of course they did 1.5 and 2.5, and then they took all the video clips from Union Cross and put them in 2.8 and then re-released 2.8 with more content. It's just been so many repackaging and just hoping people are going to keep buying it. And I mean, I guess we're the dummies because we keep buying them, but I don't know. I run into this same problem with people splitting movies in half that don't need to be. The Hobbit didn't need to be 3 movies. The last Hunger Games didn't need to be 2 movies. The last Divergent definitely didn't need to be 2 movies because the second of the 2 got completely canceled. Just make the stuff and let us play it, and don't make us buy it 9 times, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I'm a little bit split on this because it is $40 and that's a pretty good deal, I think. But also, if you have bought all the previous things, you've probably spent over $100 on them. So now a new one comes out that's much cheaper. But also, after the second Kingdom Hearts, they made, I think, the baffling decision to make everything else on a handheld. And so if they don't actually release these HD remasters, a lot of people just aren't going to be able to play these games. And so I do appreciate them bringing them to a console that the masses can play more easily instead of having to go and get a PSP and a 3DS to finish the series. And I think it is good. You're able to go back and play a game from, the first Kingdom Hearts came out, I think, in 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. It's a really old game. So that's cool. You're able to play it on this current generation. But I wish they had just combined all these together at once instead of doing 1.5 and then 2.5 and then 1.5 plus 2.5 remix and then 2.8. Their naming system is already so convoluted. And like you said, they just are they keep rehashing the same thing. Like the games reuse a lot of the same worlds over and over again. It's just they're mirroring the storyline with their releases of these games where it's just the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah.
So I definitely understand what you said about it's good that they put these out on a console that people already had. I'm one of the people that went out and got the handhelds when I found out that Kingdom Hearts was coming out on those devices. And so I just kind of wish they'd have told me in like 2010 that, hey, if you hang on to your boots, we're going to re-release these on a console you already own. There's no need for you to get a PSP or a 3DS. Because honestly, I don't think I own any other PSP games except Birth by Sleep.
Really? Man, that's crazy. You bought one just for that. I did the same thing with Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core.
I think I got it as a Christmas present. Like I told my brothers and my parents, like, hey, throw in on this one thing and don't get me anything else and I'll be happy.
I'm like so torn on this because I have the 1.5 release and I've played through 1 and I'm trying to get the trophies on it, but I love 1. Its controls don't hold up all that well. And before 3 comes out, I really don't want to play 9 games that are all, I know they differ slightly, but it's more or less the same gist in every game.
Oh, see, I think they differ dramatically. Like I just spent all that time going through all 3 stories of Birth by Sleep plus like the bonus chapter. And I just started 1 like about a week ago because I was talking to one of my friends at the bar and she was saying, oh yeah, I want to go back and start Kingdom Hearts again. And I'm like, I'm about to start the first one too. We'll play it side by side. And the controls between 1 and Birth by Sleep are not the same. And it keeps tripping me up.
Sorry, not the controls, but aren't you going through in every game just closing keyholes?
Yeah.
I guess that's what I meant by the format is you go to a world, you close a keyhole. There's a mini story and there's an overarching story. And you reuse a lot of same worlds. Not so much the combat, but I get your point. They do. Okay. The combat between 1 and 2 is vastly improved in itself. So I imagine they got better with age.
Oh, God, yeah. Jumping from, Birth by Sleep is, I guess, now the second most recent release. It was Dream Drop Distance about a year ago and Birth by Sleep like a year and a half before that. So jumping from the second most recent iteration of this game to the original was jarring.
Yeah, the first one, I went back to try and play it, or I did play it for a little bit about 2 months ago, and I went from playing, I think it was Bloodborne, or no, it was Dark Souls 3 to that, and Dark Souls 3 controls really well, and then you go back to not being able to use an analog stick for the camera. Everything's on R1, R2. The jumping's not that precise. The camera's horrible. And it's just like, man, my nostalgia goggles. Oh.
Yeah, it's still a fun game. You start on that island, and it was fun for me to realize how much better I've gotten at games since Kingdom Hearts came out and I played it that first time because, man, it took me like a week to try and beat up all those kids on that island, and it took me like 25 minutes this time.
So this week I want to talk about Yooka-Laylee. Yooka-Laylee is a platformer by Playtonic Games, which was made up of old Rare developers who are most famous for probably Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie. And this is supposed to be the spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, and it did not fare well. Overall, the problem was that this game has not aged since the N64 days. They've updated the graphics, but none of the controls, and the camera was so bad. And this day in gaming, you rarely, I think, notice bad cameras anymore. It's a little bit unexcusable, and when they happen, it's really obvious. So the premise of Yooka-Laylee is you play as a lizard named Yuka and a bat named Laylee, and the two team up to traverse the world to get book pages, these things called pages, which are pages from a book. And as you're going through the world, you unlock new skills that allow you to traverse the 3D environments better. And it's pretty much you're just going around looking for stuff. And there are way too many things to find. In each level, you have to find the pages. You have to find feathers, which are essentially a form of currency. You have to find what they call ghostwriters, which then also lead to you getting a page. You have to do quests that people give you throughout the world. And there's only 5 levels to this game, but their big thing was as you get more pages, you can unlock more of that world. So the worlds generally double in size once you meet that requirement. But the worlds were generally empty and boring, and it was not really fun to run around in the game. Overall, I would say if you love 3D platformers, maybe check it out. But this game was released a little bit before Mario Odyssey was released. And I had the misfortune of playing Mario Odyssey right before I really went through and completed this. And Mario Odyssey is how you do like a 3D game. And Yooka-Laylee, it just feels so much dated playing a game that came out, a few months after it. It's crazy. So overall, if I had to give the game a form of rating, I'd probably put it in, I would say high C. It's very average. I don't even know if I'd even go high. I might just say C. I did not enjoy platinuming this game. It got so boring after a while. The most annoying thing about this game is they didn't record voices. So every character just makes the same sound over and over again for every dialogue, and it's so grating. And it was so grating that they actually released a patch to make it less annoying. And also, they actually made a lot of patches because I initially played this about 2 weeks after it was released and hated it and put it down, and then played it a year later. They put patches in there because when you initially played, I had no idea where to go. You don't have a world map, and you have to go around this big area that's not evident where you're supposed to go next to find more worlds. And they eventually put in like signs that should have been there from the beginning that shows you this world. So you're just not wandering around like wondering what you're supposed to do. They fixed up the voices. I think they just added the option you can turn them off, which I did because they were the worst. I would say this is a solid C game. Some of the stuff they do is fun. Flying's fun. And, generally platforming's fun. Collecting stuff's fun. But playing it all the way to a platinum 100% completion is not a good time. If you're really interested in a good platformer, like I said, I would check out Mario Odyssey, or I've not played it, but I heard Hat in Time is very good. And this one was just, I wouldn't really suggest it.
Man, that's wild about the voices. It reminds me of a game I played a long time ago called Evergrace for the PS2. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
So it was a game that came out in a weird twilight period when developers had figured out how to give everybody voices, but before we'd gotten at all good at it. And so the guy who ran the shop, now admittedly I only played about probably an hour into this game, but the guy who ran the shop that I had access to, I want to say he was like half tuna fish, and he spoke in this terrible voice. And me and my friends would just go into the shop and talk to him and just laugh and would never buy anything.
All right, and now we're going to finish off our show with the Amazon review game. I will be guessing today.
All right, you ready?
I am.
Okay. This review is from someone named LaJois. In a short time, I too will be old and in the way. When they decide I am in the way and they put me away, this is how I want my last adventure to be. Then they will remember me. When we are young, having an imagination is the best way to have an adventure. But when we are old, we are called crazy. The youngins don't realize we've connected the dots and know that the truth is out there. I think this movie explains that well.
So is this a movie about a dad telling tall tales?
No.
Does this movie star two old guys?
Yes.
Is it Secondhand Lions?
No, it is not.
Oh, no.
I do love that movie, though.
Oh, all right. I was very confident in that. All right, let's just hear another review. I've lost, but I want to see what you got prepped.
All right. Before I go any further, let me say I bought this to upgrade my DVD to the 21st century, and the Blu-ray is great. It's this actor's most complete immersion into a character since his TV show and his horror flicks. This is a movie that is enjoyed best when you put yourself into the two main roles. Just let the performances draw you in and spit you out. The monster is there as an extra. It's not just a great campy horror picture.
Oh my God, it's Bubba Hotep, isn't it?
It is Bubba Hotep.
I can't believe I missed it. All right, thanks for listening, guys. Before we finish, what are you going to be checking out this week, Christian?
Well, I wasn't going to watch it, but the Lady Gaga movie and the Bradley Cooper movie, A Star is Born, has been generating a lot of buzz from people whose opinions I respect. So I'll probably go and watch that at some point. Also, Bad Times at the El Royale comes out Friday or Thursday night if you're doing premieres, and it looks super weird and super fun, and I'm really excited to figure out what it's about.
Cool. My goal is to see Venom this week if I have time. This weekend, my brother's visiting me with his kids, so I don't think I'm going to be doing too much, but he's actually huge into movies, so because his son's pretty newly born, I bet we end up watching some movies this weekend, so that'll be fun. Otherwise, I'm about 20 hours into Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm hoping to finish that in the next 2 weeks. Fingers crossed. So I will be playing more of that.
Nice. And I'll bring this up just because I know how much you said you liked the first one, but the second Goosebumps comes out Friday as well.
Ooh, I might try and go see that at we have $5 movie nights here. I might try and go see that at one of those.
Yeah, no Jack Black, but there is the Goosebumps 2 coming out.
I don't know. It'd still probably be good, but I thought Jack Black really made the first Goosebumps.
Well, he's not in the preview anywhere, but I'm looking at IMDb and it credits him as being R.L. Stine, so maybe he is in it. Maybe I misspoke.
I might just have a cameo or something.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. If you want to check us out, we are at Gambots Network on Twitter. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.